Wisconsin is in Milwaukee to talk about the Greater Together Challenge. It's a very exciting idea. I want to introduce our panelists. To my left is James Hall. He's president of the Milwaukee branch of the NAACP. Katherine Wilson is executive director of the Zeidler Center for Public Discussion. Ken Hanson is the CEO and founder of Hanson Dodge Creative. Before we talk about it, let's talk about some 6 stats, 6 tragic ways that Milwaukee leads the nation. Number 1 in black-white residential segregation. Number 1 in residential segregation based on poverty. Number 1 in the widest gap in black-white test scores. Number 1 in the black-white employment gap. Number 1 in the lowest percentage of Hispanic-owned businesses. And number 1 in the worst incarceration rate for black men. And while we're talking about statistics, just one more. Number 2 in black poverty nationally. This pamphlet was devised, I think, by the Greater Together Challenge, right?
That's correct.
Well, that sets the table. Ken, why don't you go first, because you say the challenge idea was yours, so kind of set it up, please.
I was asked by the American Institute of Graphic Arts, AIGA, to help them celebrate 100 years of design. And I sat down with the committee, with the board of directors, and I suggested that it would be better to focus on the future, what designers can and should do, than to focus on the past, that was what I would be interested in. And then at the same time that was happening, the National Public Radio ran a story on the 53206 zip code, the worst incarceration rate in America. And then shortly after that, I think I read in Huffington Post that Wisconsin was the worst state in America to raise a black child. And then not long after that, there was a story in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel about the sort of divide and how the polarization of this area.
The political
right.
patterns,
and
segregated.
And I was just kind of dumbfounded by it. It happened to me almost like bang, bang, bang. And I was working on trying to think about the future and how to get designers focused on the future. And I just had this idea, what if we focused on Milwaukee's most critical issue? Okay. And so I pitched that idea to the board of directors, and they just said yes. They liked the idea, and it was their encouragement that led to the building of a coalition around the idea.
Well, let's go down. Katherine, what's the involvement of your organization in this before we get to James?
The Zeidler Center for Public Discussion leads and facilitates discussions on the most contentious issues facing Milwaukee today. And we were already planning a series on segregation based on the feedback that we've gotten on our dialogues on poverty and on what makes Milwaukee thriving. And so the people really want to talk about segregation. And then when I heard about the coalition, it aligned perfectly. So there was a lot of synchronicity between the challenge event and our desire to lead dialogues across Milwaukee's neighborhoods. And we've already been in 53206, leading dialogues in those neighborhoods, to get people to talk together, to come together, and to also think of initiatives. So it's perfect. It was just perfect timing that the dialogues that we already were going to hold, we could feed then into, well, you're brainstorming together, why not also submit to the challenge? And so that's where the Zeidler Center is partnered, and very excited to be a part of the Greater Together Coalition.
Mr. Hall, tragically, I think these numbers and the way that Milwaukee leads is nothing new to you, sir. So why are you participating here? What new effort to fight these problems do you hope grows out of it, sir? And again, welcome back to Wisconsin.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back. As you indicate, those numbers, the data, are a sad, reflection on our community. It's a dubious distinction to be #1 in all of those very negative categories. And I can't see how anyone could be proud of that or could find that to be something that we want to be identified with our community. Notwithstanding that, the numbers have been allowed and the conditions, the numbers, we're looking at the data, which is very bad, but the data reflect the reality of conditions out there. So those conditions have been allowed to linger and to, have been perpetuated just for far too long. Now, the NAACP, which I happen to be president of, the Milwaukee branch, has as its mission addressing and eradicating segregation and disparities across the board. If that's our mission, to address those types of things, then you see here in Milwaukee, we have our work is cut out for us. So we are really, in terms of a mission of the NAACP, we're worst in the country in many of the things that the NAACP is trying to combat. So obviously, we have taken the position for a long time that it takes more than just those who are the most direct victims of these disparities to be the ones concerned about them. It really requires the input and involvement of the entire community in trying to address them. And that's been missing, we think, to a considerable degree as part of the equation here. In fact, the BBC came over about the incarceration piece and expressed amazement that with Wisconsin having what they said is probably the highest rate of incarceration in the world, where's the hue and cry, where's the outrage? So to have an engagement such as this, we think is important in terms of trying to address this.
I want to spend most of this show on the idea of teasing up ideas to solve the problems, but please allow me one follow-up question on these tragic stats. What toll does it take on this community? Do you want to go first, Mr. Hall?
Well, I think it takes a toll several-fold, and I'll just state it briefly. And obviously, it takes a direct toll on the people who are on the short end of the stick of all of these data in terms of day-to-day living conditions, lacking employment, reduced opportunities and access and healthcare and everything else across the board. So it's a direct toll there. Secondly, it takes a toll on everyone, although somehow we act like we don't realize that in terms of the costs to maintain prisons and social programs and higher taxes and the other things, as opposed to having more people providing, a capital resource and a human resource in terms of contributing in the system if we had broader access. So it takes that type of toll. And then thirdly, there's a social toll, I think, by having a community that's as divided as we are, that's really an outlier in many ways in terms of the rest of the nation. Not only are we the most segregated metropolitan area here in Milwaukee, the state of Wisconsin, as you indicated, is one of the most divided, politically and otherwise, polarized across the board. So I think it takes, and that's not totally unique to here, but there's a toll a price to be paid for that too, as opposed to what you can accomplish working together.
Katherine or Ken, your thoughts on the toll?
It's hard to add more than what James so eloquently said. I would say that people have just lost the ability to even speak to each other. Just even when you drive across the city on North Avenue, right across the city, it's like going through walls of neighborhoods that are so divided, and it's astounding and embarrassing. And when I talk to people about talking to each other, it's almost like they've forgotten how to do that. How do I talk to those people? And those people are just a few blocks away, but they're across this divide. And so that toll of dividing our community is huge. It's huge.
Ken, you've got a staff of 75 very creative people. So your goal is to make them more aware of the problems, or just talk about your...
For some reason, this is a very personal issue to me. I kind of feel like my generation had all this promise. Like, I grew up in the 60s, right? And I feel like my generation really talked a good game, you know? Like, we supported Father Grappi, we, you know, we loved black music, it seemed like we had so much promise, right? And then we've gotten on with our lives, right? And then at a certain point you realize, holy cow, we just haven't done enough. We actually have let down, from my point of view, we have just sort of let ourselves down, we let our dream down. And then I feel like in Milwaukee, we're just never going to be the city that we could be like this. We have the potential of just being a great city. And I think about, you know, we're spending a lot of time talking about the hardship, right, and the suffering, which is real. I don't want to take one thing away from it. But something that we need to think about is the celebration of actually working together and living together. Xavier Ruffin, his presentation at the press conference, I was just really heartened by that, because I felt like Xavier's helping us by, he's going to do a series of videos to help humanize the problem and the issues and just help sort of get inside of it and help people understand really what's going on there. And he's just such a great example, even within our committee, of how much better off we are together than we are apart. We're just, you know, that it's, we can be so much richer of a culture, we can be smarter, we can be a better place to live. And so you know, so yes, we want to solve the problems, but I feel like let's get on with the good part. Let's get on with the thing that happens when we actually do work together.
Okay.
I'd like to add on to that.
Please, Katherine.
One of the things I was saying is, if we get to the end of this and have this statement that Milwaukee is segregated, to me, that will be a profound waste of time. We already know that. The report card is in. The stats are good. And I think the focus is on trying to come up with ideas that address the segregation, trying to make the city a thriving place, and what is going to lead towards that. So that's where I'm excited. So while we focus on the stats,
yes,
we don't want to stay there.
You want to build on the stats, and that's what I want to talk about next. You talk about this exciting process of soliciting ideas and what's next in the stages and how it's going to work, and who can lay that out?
Well, let me start. We had a press conference on the 15th, which is a call for entries. It's our objective to have 100 fabulous entries, and then to reduce those to 10 finalists, and then the 10 finalists will be presented at a challenge presentation in the first week of October.
And let me quickly parse that. Entries to do what? Okay.
I'm sorry, so entries to dismantle segregation and promote social justice.
Wow.
In the Milwaukee-area.
Very grand goals. I hope you achieve them. Okay, so go ahead, Mr. Hall.
Well, what I would say is I see it as a three-pronged approach, or I see it as a win-win-win. I see it as we will have those entries. Ultimately, there will be one winner, if you will, that will go forward as the grand idea that is you know, hopefully will be a catalyst for change and so forth. But so that's a win to the extent that that idea is out there. Secondly, it's a win because the people coming together to work on the other ideas that may not be the ultimate, quote, winner, they too will it will reflect people coming together, coming up with different ideas to try to address the issue, and all of those too can be initiatives that continue and effect change and outcomes. So it's a winner in that sense. Thirdly, just the people coming together as we are, this whole effort and initiative is a winner, because before this, I wasn't sitting here talking with Ken and Katherine and all the other hundreds of people who are involved with this. So that's all part of the change that we want to reflect here.
As you follow up, Mr. Hall, as you take this back to other African American leaders, even at the church and neighborhood level, how are you saying you must get the how is this different?
Right.
We've heard this song before. So how are you answering that, sir?
Well, I'll be honest with you, as if I haven't in my other answers.
You have.
I keep saying we all have to come out of our silos, meaning certainly it's easy to say as we make this appeal, we're asking CEOs in the business community and suburbanites and others to give attention to this problem and to have an awareness and a concern about this. And we're asking for more engagement there in this dialogue to try to address the issue. But in the African American and other minority communities, same thing. We have to, when I discuss this with some people in those communities, some say, well, tried that before, been there, done that, that's more talk. Now we all know ultimately we need programs, we need jobs and opportunities and programs. We need concrete things it's a whole comprehensive situation out there that needs to be addressed. But people in the African American community, I think, as well as the other minority communities, as well as others, need to be willing to come out of the silo and realize we have to engage together if we are going to address this. And you're right. I've had some people in my organization and in other organizations who there's been such a history and a pattern of the lack of cooperation, as Katherine and Ken have indicated, that they feel reluctant or beaten down or whatever. There's not an inclination to think that this is going to work. We have to move beyond that and embrace the future and embrace what can be and realize that to change the types of outcomes we have here, it will involve changing attitudes, changing the culture, engaging everyone in the dialogue. I say similar as to what ultimately happened in the civil rights movement when everyone became concerned about what was happening to people. Then there was a chance for a movement to really effect change.
Well, Katherine, we were talking prior to the show, the taping, and you talked about the first meeting tonight. So
yes.
How's that going to work in terms of beginning this process?
So I would say that segregation is difficult to talk about, and as a group, especially when groups come together to try to formulate ideas, it can be difficult to talk about segregation. And so what the Zeidler Center is doing throughout the summer up to the deadline, and actually beyond the deadline, is hosting a series of dialogues. We're going into organizations, we're going into neighborhoods to help people have this conversation. So we'll facilitate this dialogue, and our first one is tonight, actually, and then help them brainstorm together the initiative that they might want to submit to the challenge.
Okay. But you're going to start with people telling their personal stories, the power of personal stories?
So the type of facilitation method we use at the Zeidler Center always asks people to start from their personal experience. So the facilitators, there'll be a facilitator for every 5 people. And the first question we always ask, and the first question in this series is about your experience of segregation in Milwaukee. And so every person will have the same amount of time to speak, and no one else will be interrupting when that person is speaking. And so that experience of being heard, I think, can be a real foundation for ideas, so.
Ken, Wisconsin operates in the Capitol and covers a lot of people, elected officials with titles. Is there a deliberate effort to stay away from the political strictures and structures in this challenge?
Yes. I think that, first of all, we don't believe this is a political problem. I mean, we feel like this is everybody's problem, and the last thing we'd want to do is to polarize our audience. Quite honestly, from my point of view, the right is as important to this movement as the left. And when everybody sees it as their issue is when we begin to really succeed. And so we will make a deliberate effort to be non-political.
Well, do you want your final, is it final set of ideas or final idea by October, what's the date?
September 7th.
September 7th. Mm-hmm. Okay.
The final submissions.
That comes 2 months before the next set of elections. Is that a coincidence, or do you want it to be part of the dialogue leading up to the November 4 elections?
Well, one of the small group dialogues will be with elected officials without their titles, and so everyone will have the same amount of time to speak. Now, that is in service, I think, of people working together. And so that's not coming down on any side or trying to lead to greater polarization, but actually having people work together who might be in office. Yeah. on the issue.
Right. And my view is, and I agree, we don't intend to be in this effort is not political in a partisan way. It's not, and as Ken said, the right is as important as the left. We want everybody in this movement. But I think ultimately, political leaders, just like business leaders and civic leaders and others, but a large part of the changes to outcomes that we need here and must occur emanate from political process. So we do want, ideally, this dialogue and conversation and concern will ultimately influence and impact political leaders in the political process so that change can be effected.
Well, which leads to my next set of questions. I find it so fascinating, I have a lot of questions. Is it allowed to submit ideas that cost money? Is it allowed to submit ideas that require a change in state statutes? Are both those allowed, or are those off limits?
I think that right now we're open to any ideas at any level. Okay. People have talked to us about ideas that are very large, very, very large, that will affect policy. And then we've heard a lot of ideas that are small and easy to accomplish, and all we need is for people to come together and do them. Okay. So we're interested in great ideas at this point. Now, how will those get executed, or how will they work their way into policy? That's phase 2. And we're building partnerships, and we're building funding relationships and that sort of thing for phase 2. And we'll see what the needs are. We feel like the fundraising for phase 2 will be made easier by the efforts we've put into phase 1.
I just have one more question about politics. Is the formation of a group like this, creative types, volunteers, is this an admission that the political systems have failed to solve some of these problems?
Well, to the extent that Wisconsin is number 1, we have all failed to solve that problem.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Is there a demographic target? Are you aiming at getting more ideas from the millennials than boomers, or the next generation of teenage African Americans? Right. Are they going to be appealed to, Mr. Hall?
I think the idea is to seek good ideas wherever they may come from, and certainly the appeal is to young and old, the whole spectrum.
There's no age limit on
There's no age limit on ideas. I think we're looking for the good ideas.
Yeah. Okay. Quite honestly, I'm hoping for national ideas. So I'm going to work on an angle. I want Harvard to get involved, to be honest. I'd like policymakers of national stature to help us think about this issue. So,
excuse me, go ahead.
I just want to say, and one other thing, back to an early question you asked about the toll that this plays, maybe it was part of the answer, but jobs and opportunities, to the extent that we can address this problem, Wisconsin and this area lags behind the rest of the country in jobs, and I mean new jobs and businesses locating here and all of that. So, some best practices and good ideas, if they come from outside of this community or whatever, that will infuse this metropolitan area with new concepts and so forth, I think would be welcome.
Is Harvard looking at it, Ken?
I'm not going to, my objective is for them to look at it.
Okay.
And just to add on to that, while there will be one winner, all of the ideas that are submitted will be presented at a citywide community dialogue that's going to take place on Sunday, October 5th. Okay. So if you submit an idea, it will get some press.
Is there a precedent for this type of challenge in the nation? Are you aware of one, Ken?
Well, I think the Bloomberg challenge is relevant. It's a little different, but it's, that was really sort of an open call for ideas.
Okay.
So
and doesn't, totally off the point, does President Clinton's organization seek challenges like that too?
I'm not familiar with that, but
the Clinton challenge,
yeah.
It seems like he may have a call for ideas as well, but
this is a regional issue. Who are your emissaries to the suburbs? Are there?
Well, one of our key partners is Common Ground. Common Ground has a constituency of, I think, 50,000, 40 to 50,000, and a large part of that constituency is churches. And so that's a big help to us in terms of reaching out to that part of the population. Beyond that, it's part of our objective to sort of go deeper into the community.
And the Zeidler Center for Public Discussion has relationships with the outside of Milwaukee proper into the greater Milwaukee area. So we've hosted dialogues in these various communities and are urging them to consider these kinds of dialogues as well.
And in terms of within Milwaukee County, I know the county exec, for instance, Chris Abley, I discussed this with him just last week, and certainly the benefit of this type of thing in terms of the county is clear, and I think he would embrace that.
Okay, let's talk about the process. Somebody watching this show who says, I'd like to be a part of this dialogue, I might have an idea. What can she or he do? How could they become a part of it or submit an idea?
Greatertogether.me
Greatertogether.me
is the website, and you can submit your proposal right there. You can also contact the Zeidler Center at info@zeidlercenter.org or call our number 414-446-1502 to set up a dialogue, and we'll take you through the process if you would like to discuss segregation, to get help brainstorming and submitting your proposal. We'll do that.
And you want a wide net. You said you hope to get 100 ideas?
Yeah, our objective is 100 great ideas and then 10 finalists.
So people shouldn't think, someone watching this show shouldn't think, oh, my idea's dumb, or
Not at all.
submit it.
I think just the opposite. I think that I think a small idea could be fantastic, right? And help inspire others.
Well, talk to me then about the timeline. The deadline for ideas, do I have this right, September 7th?
Yes.
September 7th. The community dialogues are happening from today through September, actually. And then the citywide dialogue that will bring all those groups together, and the networking event that exposes all the ideas that have been submitted. That's Sunday, October 5th.
Okay.
And then the event where the winner is announced.
Winner, because is there going to be 10
the
finalists?
challenge event and the,
Yeah.
yes.
10
Ken, you wanna
finalists.
talk about
10
that?
finalists, excuse me.
So 10 finalists. The 10 finalists will be presented to an audience the first week of October. The audience themselves will pick the winner at that point. And so that's why I say, that I feel like there is going to be more than one winner, right? Because I think just to be a finalist is a pretty winning situation. And the other thing that I would bring up is we're going to each of the 10 finalists, we're going to pair with a creative team to help them create their presentation, because we really want them to really have a great opportunity to succeed and get their idea across. And so the 10 finalists will each be paired with a design team that'll help them do a really great presentation.
Okay. And then there'll be eventually one winning proposal chosen, and that'll get some $5,000?
Well, the idea here is that we want to give $5,000 to the winner, to the sponsor of the winning idea.
Okay.
And the objective there is that they have a modest grant for them personally to stay involved. Then we are going to go out to get the money to actually finance the idea.
But it's a very healthy dialogue for all of the 10 finalists to be discussed and be made public. I mean, that furthers everybody's goal, doesn't it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And I imagine funders will be in the audience wanting to reach out to all of the other ideas as well. So we'll see.
And really, if you look at, for instance, what's going on in the Twin Cities right now, in Minneapolis, there's a dynamic process occurring in terms of ideas and inclusion in the downtown. And there's no reason why this metro area cannot be that type of place.
Okay.
You know, one thing I wanted to mention was, this is a volunteer initiative. Nobody's getting paid anything. We're getting together every week in and week out, discussing ideas in, I think, a very open and generous way. It's really, I have to tell you that the experience has been very heartening for me. And one of the biggest challenges we're going to have is that everybody is saying yes. Nobody, like we asked for the press conference to be at City Hall, and the first thing the mayor said is, "Can I welcome you to City Hall?" Right? We're talking to every group that we talk to. Almost every single group we talk to says, "How can we be involved?" And so there is something happening here in terms of initiative and concern for the issues. I think one of the things that's exciting is that an awful lot of people are laboring on this and don't feel like they're getting the traction that they'd really like, and that this feels like they are indeed greater together, that the fact that we're all working together is going to make this whole thing happen. And so in a sense, the coalition becomes a prototype of what we really want to have happen.
Okay. Well, time's slipping away, so maybe one final question I'd like each of you to answer. If this is a success, what change will you see or feel in this community in 5 or 7 or 10 years? Just what did that motivational speaker once say? Picture of the preferred future. You want to go first, Mr. Hall?
Yeah. I would say, I would see when I go to a meeting or a restaurant or an event or whatever, that it's not just all one race or the other. That from an African American point of view, there are people included at the table, in jobs, functioning in opportunity. It's not, you can live your life here, going through life, and sometimes without even realizing how segregated the existence is. So I would say that you could see and feel the inclusion in terms of jobs, opportunity, and access.
Thank you. Katherine, your vision of success?
Well, for one, those statistics wouldn't exist anymore. And I would say, going back to my picture of driving through Milwaukee, that neighborhoods would be unique, but not unique because there's just one race living there, but unique in other ways, in more creative and beautiful ways. Maybe there's a park or an interesting center or something that distinguishes a neighborhood, not the fact that everyone looks the same.
Okay.
So.
Ken?
I'd like the power and the money and the employers in this city to see it as their civic and moral responsibility to reach out and act on these issues and do it in ways that indeed this issue is every bit as important as, actually, I take that back. This issue is far more important than building a stadium downtown. There is no issue more important, and that it needs to be part of everyone's civic responsibility, and especially those in power today.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thanks for a chance to talk about the Greater Together Challenge. Thanks to Mr. James Hall, Katherine Wilson, and Ken Hanson. Wisconsin I would like to come back after October 7th and talk to your winning submitter and follow this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.